Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're going to dive into two paths to happiness that, at first glance, seem like they're complete opposites. One comes from modern psychology, the other from ancient philosophy. But are they really so different? Let's find out. Okay, let's just start with a feeling I think we can all relate to. You hear it all the time, right? From self-help books, therapists, spiritual gurus. Everyone tells you to just let go. But what in the world does that actually mean? This Reddit user just nails the frustration perfectly. It's like being handed a giant box of Legos and being told to build a castle, but with zero instructions.
And that frustration? It really gets to the heart of a huge puzzle. We've got these two major traditions, both promising us a way to feel secure and happy, but they seem to be pointing in totally opposite directions.
And this is where it gets really interesting. On the one hand, you've got the Western ideal of secure attachment. The idea here is that security comes from building a really stable, solid internal feeling that you are loved. But on the other hand, Eastern philosophies, like Buddhism, talk about non-attachment, finding security by, well, freeing yourself from any fixed idea of who you are. So, what gives? Is one right and the other wrong?
All right, let's start by tracing that Western map. This path argues that our sense of security isn't built in isolation. Nope, it's built through our connections with other people, starting from the very beginning of our lives.
The foundation for all of this is something called attachment theory. The core idea is pretty simple, actually. If, as a kid, you have caregivers you can really count on, they become your safe haven when things get scary and a secure base that gives you the confidence to go out and explore the world.
And you can see how this plays out over a lifetime. Those early relationships literally shape our minds. They help us build this internal blueprint, this deep-down feeling of a self that's worthy of love. And people who have that secure internal model, they tend to be less defensive, way more compassionate, and just have better relationships. So the key here is that security is an outside-in job, built on trust.
Okay, so that's one map. Now let's completely switch gears and look at the Eastern map. This one offers a radically different inside-out approach to finding that very same feeling of peace and security. In Buddhist psychology, the goal isn't to build a stable idea of yourself. It's actually to release your grip on any fixed idea. That's non-attachment. It's that feeling of ease that comes when you stop trying to nail down your constantly changing thoughts and feelings into something solid and permanent. The whole theory is that clinging, trying to hold on to things, that's the source of our suffering. Why? Because everything eventually changes. And this whole practice is rooted in a core Buddhist idea called Anattā, which usually gets translated as not self. It's this understanding that when you really look inside your own mind, you can't find a single, solid, unchanging you that exists all on its own.
But, and this is super important, it's where a lot of people get tripped up. Not self does not mean no self. Buddhism is not saying you don't exist. Think of not self as more of a practical strategy. It's a way of looking at your own experience and realizing that the self you're so attached to isn't a static thing, it's a dynamic, constantly shifting process.
You know, I absolutely love this analogy from another Redditor for how you actually practice this. Think about your anxious thoughts like a cat that keeps meowing at you for food. You don't have to scream at the cat, right? And you also don't have to give in and feed it every single time it meows. You can just notice the meowing, acknowledge it's there without getting all tangled up in it. Eventually, on its own, it quiets down.
So, we have these two paths that seem completely at odds. One says, build a strong, stable self. The other says, see through the illusion of a solid self. How on earth can they both be right? Well, this is where modern research comes in with a surprisingly elegant answer. Researchers started to wonder, is non-attachment just some fancy spiritual term for what we in the West already call secure attachment, or is it a totally different psychological skill?
So they set up a study. They basically developed a way to measure how non-attached someone was, and then they compared that to their attachment style and also to how open or closed-minded they tended to be.
And the results were fascinating. Now you're seeing a number on the screen here, but don't worry about the math. Here's what this number really proves. Even after you take into account how securely attached a person is, non-attachment still had a really powerful, independent effect on making them less closed-minded.
So here's the big takeaway. Non-attachment is not the same thing as being securely attached. It is its own, separate, powerful resource for well-being. You can be securely attached to the people in your life and still cultivate this internal freedom from rigid ideas. They're not in conflict. They're just different tools in the toolbox.
And you know what? This scientific finding clicks perfectly with this beautiful piece of wisdom from the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. He taught that our common idea of letting go, being emotionally distant or aloof, is a total misunderstanding of the concept.
True non-attachment, in his view, is actually a deeper, more complete way of loving. It's about shifting from a love that says, I need you to be this certain way for me, to a love that says, I just want you to be happy and free, regardless of my own expectations. It's loving without needing to possess.
So we end up with this much more complete map for a flourishing life. It's not about choosing between attachment and non-attachment. It seems there are two complementary paths. You've got the social route, looking outward, building a healthy sense of self through relationships. And you've got the introspective route, looking inward, gently loosening your grip on that very same self, and seeing its fluid, changing nature.
And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. What if the most powerful path to well-being isn't about choosing between East and West, between the social and the solitary? What if it's about learning how to do both? How to build deep, secure connections with others, while at the same time cultivating a spacious, gentle freedom within our own minds?